So for the past 2 years I've been building a video game about ant people. These little guys have ant-like abilities where they work together as a hive mind to carry out complex tasks. And they also have human-like abilities, using tools and building houses and stuff like that. So they're kind of like the best of people and the best of ants combined. Their behaviour is fairly complex. When they come across a set of tasks, like collecting these little resource crumbs, they'll automatically divvy up that work between them, so that each task gets exactly the correct number of ants working on it. And when this happens on a large scale, it can look very satisfying, almost like clockwork as all the ants run around and perform their tasks in unison. And speaking of scale, I'm using a lot of programming tricks to simulate as many ants as I possibly can. In particular, these ants are multi-threaded, meaning they're spread across all the different cores in your CPU, with different ants basically being simulated on different cores. I'm even handling their pathfinding code on different cores, which was very tricky to figure out, but I got there in the end, and there's a whole other video on that topic. But this time, what I want to focus on is not so much the technical details, but rather the big picture. Because this game has evolved a lot over the last 2 years, and even since the last video came out. In fact, I've actually now completed a demo of the game, which you can play right now on Steam. But more about that later. First, I want to show you all of the cool features that this game now has. Let's take it from the top. So when you start a new level, you just have one anthill. This anthill is your village center, and it starts with 50 ants. If I click and drag on this anthill, then I can lay a pheromone trail that the ants will follow. They're going to move up and down that trail back and forth until they find an idle task, a task that needs ants, at which point they subscribe to it and carry it out. So these ants can be directed by you, but at the same time they show quite a lot of initiative. And the sort of driving principle here was to try and give you a good level of control over your ants, while at the same time avoiding too much fiddly micromanagement. If I want to change what the ants are doing, then I can just redraw this trail. But I can also grab some of the ants with right click, and then I can send them somewhere. I'm calling this the command pheromone instead of the trail pheromone. And once these ants finish their command, they'll go back to their trail again. This feature is handy for when you want to rebalance the number of ants on different tasks, or you just want to do something a single time. Now, as you collect resources, you're going to fill up these little milestone meters over here. And each time they fill up, you can choose a new upgrade for your colony. I've recently added a bunch of new upgrade types for your anthills that give you extra housing capacity or extra hit points. And I've also made these upgrades transform the appearance of your buildings. So it's like you can kind of see the ants as they rise up through the tech tree, which I think is pretty cool. These upgrades will also give you pennies, and you can then spend these pennies to place the buildings you've unlocked. If I place down a new anthill building, then I'll be able to get more ants, although the building does start empty, and it has to then be filled with ant larvae, which will mature into your ants. Your village center can passively spawn one new larvae every second, and that might sound like a lot, one every second, but actually when you need hundreds more ants, that's actually pretty slow. So you can also unlock this nursery building, which uses food to spawn additional larvae. Your ants will bring food here automatically, and then they will carry the larvae to your anthills automatically as well. So like I was saying earlier, the ants have quite a lot of independence when it comes to transporting goods around the colony. That said, if you've got lots of destinations and you want the ants to prioritize a particular one, then you can add that building to their trail, because ants will always prioritize buildings that are on their trail over buildings that are not on their trail. So as you build up more and more ants, you're naturally going to need more space and more resources as well. So another new feature that I've added is scouting. You may have already noticed these little passageways that lead out of the starting room. If I grab some of my ants and I send them here, then they will travel down the passageway and they'll scout out where it leads to. And this can reveal a whole new area that may well have different resource types to gather. This fog of war effect was really quite fun to create. It's made using a texture that I stretch out across the whole level so that one pixel in the texture corresponds to one tile in the level. At first, this texture starts out mostly black, but then what I do is I mark out particular regions of the texture to become visible, and I then simulate a ripple that spreads out from the white areas, gradually filling the visible area with white pixels. Now this ripple propagation is a very heavyweight task because it's happening per pixel, and so I perform it with a compute shader, which basically means I pass it off to the graphics card because that's the sort of thing the graphics card is really good at, and this keeps the CPU open for more important things. Then I use a graphics shader to make this texture look the way it's intended to. These white pixels become transparent, and I add some smoothing and rippling and banding to make the fog look more natural. Whenever you scout out a new room, this quite often will trigger a battle wave. You'll get a little warning indicator like this, and after a delay, hostile creatures will start to pour out from that location. Now your ants consider combat to be a top priority task, meaning whenever your ants get close to a hostile creature, they will drop whatever they're doing and they will begin fighting. It's kind of like an immune system response that your colony has, but even so, it definitely helps to send additional ants to back them up. In fact, I think that combat is one area of the game where a little bit of micromanagement and fiddliness will actually help the game. And so I've started adding different enemy types that have different strengths and weaknesses. The most common enemy that you'll see is these locusts. These guys may be weak, but their strength is that they'll always attack you in swarms, and they will go straight for your buildings and try to break them down. More rarely, you're going to see beetles, and these guys are slower and more heavily armoured, and they have a particularly strong attack that can smash your buildings a lot faster than locusts can. Do keep in mind that if you let your village centre be destroyed, then you will fail the level, so you really ought to focus on these guys when they turn up. And sometimes you'll also see birds. These guys have very little interest in your buildings, and instead, what they want to do is they want to munch on your ants. So it's a good idea to pay attention when you're fighting a bird and help your little guys dodge the attacks. Adding a wider range of enemy types is going to be a big task for the future, but these are the ones that I've got so far. So for this whole scouting mechanic to feel right, I've had to also create much more complex levels to explore, which means I've had to upgrade the level generator once again. In fact, it feels like every time I put out a video these days, I'm upgrading the level generator too. But this time I do think it's pretty good. The basic idea is we are going to build the level on a zoomed out grid, a coarse grid as it is known. And this lets me quickly block out the rough shape of the level. And then this rough shape can be refined through a series of automated steps. I begin by laying out rooms and the pathways connecting these rooms. And then I add these little nodules to some of the rooms. These are sort of extra bits of space that help make the room look less square, give them a more natural shape. They are, after all, supposed to be clearings in vegetation rather than literal rooms like a human would build. And finally, I populate these rooms with a range of different resources and hazards, and each room can have its own particular recipe for how to do that. So you can see all of this happening in this background footage, Each of these levels you see are following the exact same generation recipe, which does make them all quite similar. But even still, the randomness injected into this process helps them feel fairly unique each time. And so as I continue to add new recipes in the future, I think what we'll see is that the variety of levels this generator can create will really start to expand. Anyway, as you expand your colony, you're going to start collecting more and more resources, and eventually you'll fill up this feast meter in the corner. And this will allow you to throw a royal feast, which is the final step in founding an anthill village. Now when you trigger this, the aroma from the feast will spread out across the level, and then you'll end up facing a particularly challenging battle wave. But if you clear this wave, then your village is now officially settled. And this means that the ants can take care of themselves now, and you as their mayor can fly away to begin all over again. I want the flow of this game to feel a little bit roguelike-y, where the levels are fairly quick and have quite a lot of variety, and where you'll keep some of your upgrades as you fly from one level to the next. But that's all going to be a task for another time. So feasting lets you win the level, but there is also a couple of ways to lose the level. In the other corner of the screen you can see this clock, and it's counting down to the evening. Once evening hits, a frost is going to begin to spread, starting from the outermost edges, but eventually covering everything and reaching even your village center. Any of your buildings that get caught in this frost will stop working, and any ants that get caught in this frost will freeze and, sadly, pass away. But the heat that gets created when you feast is enough to keep this frost at bay, and so you've got to at least begin the feast before evening comes and the frost overtakes you. This means that the frost is something of a soft time limit on the level, and once you pass that time limit, things get more and more difficult until the level is cleared. Now, of course, you do also lose if enemy creatures destroy your village center. And the reason why I've added 2 loss conditions to this game is that combat is not something that everybody enjoys equally. I think particularly in the village building genre, lots of people like their games to be quite peaceful. And so I'm planning to add some kind of a difficulty ascension to the game where on the lower difficulties, the starting difficulties, there isn't going to be very much fighting, and the frost is going to be your biggest foe. But as the difficulty rises, combat can become a much bigger concern, and you'll need to start building proper defenses for your colony and strategizing against the different kinds of creatures that you will find in each level. But again, that's a task for a future video. So to help you reach the feast in time, you can also unlock some new industrial buildings. Compost allows you to expand your food supply gradually. Each compost costs you a penny, and then when placed it becomes a delivery point for leaves. Once you fill it up, the compost will transform into a mushroom that gives a steady supply of food, and then it will refund your penny, meaning that you can immediately place down another compost. This whole thing is inspired by real leafcutter ants, which have the amazing ability to cut down leaves and then use them as a sort of a planting medium to grow fungus that they use for their food supply. A similar building is sprouters, which become a delivery point for seeds. Whenever you cut leaves, those plants often tend to drop a couple of seeds as well, and after gathering enough of them, you'll be able to plant another sprout. And once that sprout grows, you can start harvesting it for more leaves and even more seeds, which fuels a cycle. You can also find wood and clay, which are non-renewable resources, meaning you will eventually run out of them. Unless you unlock the mine building. Placing a mine onto a depleted resource point will allow you to mine it renewably, giving you a permanent supply of both of these resources. And they are both very useful for the next building we'll talk about, the tool shed. This allows you to use different resources to equip tools to your ants. So using clay, we can equip them with hammers, which makes them much better at harvesting resources and also gives them a bonus against armored enemies such as the beetle. And by using wood, you can equip them with bows and arrows, which makes them very effective at fighting from range, which is especially useful against the birds because it helps you dodge the birds' attacks. Similarly, you can also get a wardrobe building that lets you equip your ants with different clothing items that give them further bonuses. And each ant can have both a tool and some clothing, which means you can mix and match these bonuses depending on the situation and what you want each particular anthill to be doing. We've also finally got some finished music for the game. This track was made by my friend Alex, who also made most of the music for my last game, Patch Quest. Let's have a listen. So this music has actually been split into 4 separate stems, and I can modify the playback of each stem depending on what is happening in the level. So to begin, we have this background stem that has a lot of ambient noises in it, and this plays loudest when you are out in pristine nature. And next we have this stem with the leading instruments, and so this stem is what gives the music a lot of its melody. And this one plays mainly when you're in peacetime, that is when you're not under attack. Then we have a third stem that helps fill out the track, give it a little bit of bulk. And this one plays when you've got loads of ants on screen. The busyness of it is sort of meant to represent the busyness of all your ants running around. And finally, this fourth stem represents danger, and it plays when you're in combat. So I have the ability to play any combination of these stems, and I can also smoothly adjust their volume and blend between them and fade them over time. Overall, the music has the ability to adapt based on what's happening on screen. And this means that the music can stay fresh for quite a long time. Even though the loop is only about 4 minutes long in total, it feels much longer than that in game. So, do you like this music? If you do, let Alex know by dropping a comment. And I think that just about covers everything in this demo, which, once again, you can now play for free on Steam. I've left a link in the doobly-doo below. Now there's still loads more that I'm planning to add to this game, and I always like to take on feedback and ideas from the community as I develop. I'm not always super consistent with videos, and it's because ultimately I spend more of my time developing than I do YouTubing. And so if you want to keep up to date with everything, a good way to do that is to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. And before I show you the trailer that I've created for this demo, I've got one more thing to say, which is that this game has already passed 5,000 wishlists on Steam, which is amazing, especially since that's all from before the demo has even launched. And I guess this means the next big milestone we need to hit is 10,000. Anyway, that's all for now, and as always, thanks for playing.